Just because someone loses their way and stumbles, that doesn't mean that they're lost forever. Now, this is a quote by Professor Charles Xavier from the movie X-Men Days of Future Past. It's a line that really, resonates well with me, and I think anyone who has ever felt like they have lost their way in one way or another can, really relate to this line. Okay, so in the movie The Days of Future Past, we see at the beginning of the film how right now the X-Men are living in this kind of like alternate post-apocalyptic future where the humans have really hunted them down near to extinction. What the X-Men decided to do at this point was to kind of send in Wolverine's mind back into the past so he could find Charles Xavier and convince him to alter the course of their future. However, when Wolverine or Logan finds the Professor, he isn't quite the same man that we remember him from the First Class film. He kind of lost his hope, his optimism, and this kind of like, proactive attitude that he carried with him in that film. At this point, Charles has really, suffered through a lot of loss, from losing his loved ones, his allies, even losing his students, and his ability to walk, which is probably one of the most devastating things that could happen to any of us, right? Now, Charles was really under a lot of medication at this point because he wanted to be able to walk, but being able to walk with the drugs that he was using meant that, he would have to also give up his mutant powers, which was mind reading and kind of like being able to control people's minds as well. So yeah, at this point, Charles was really more of like a drug addict, partly because he wanted to numb all the pain that not just from the things that he felt he has lost, but also really kind of like the pain that he would feel from others when he has his power and they turn on and he can kind of absorb everything that's happening around him. Now, even though he's gone through such a traumatic series of events, Charles still found a way to rise above all of this. The first step Charles took forward was mainly because of his care for other people. Specifically right now, his thought kind of revolved around Raven. You see, Raven or Mystique, is kind of like the key to the future that they're trying to prevent. It is her mutant genes that gave the villain of the movie, Bolivar Trask, that capability to create these Sentinels. It's kind of like giant robot killing machine that pretty much destroyed not just most of the mutants of their time, but also pretty much, laid waste to the earth and kind of just created this really dark and bleak space. You see, in this version of the films, Charles and Raven kind of grew up together and they have this kind of like brother and sister kind of like bond or relationship. Charles really felt like in a lot of ways that although they've disagreed on many things, that he kind of abandoned her, and he still feels very much like he's responsible to not just, help her, but also to really save her from being captured and kind of being tortured and being used to this, really horrible kind of future that they're all just, trying to prevent. It's kind of funny how people work, because at times that, it's really hard for us to do anything for ourselves, right? Especially on those days that we just feel like there's no hope to anything or there's no point for us to just get anything, because even with the effort, nothing good will ever come out of it. So, during this time, I guess, it's easier for us to take action for others, And I'm sure if you sit down and you think about it, there are people that all of us care for. Could be a family member, a friend, or heck, could even be someone from your past, right? That if they were to ever see you again today, you would want them to be proud of the person that you are. So whatever it is, that thought of serving others, I think is a really powerful and really potent kind of tool to get us into action. Man, and I know how hard it is, right? Just to kind of just get out there, and especially this concept or trying to change the world or the people around you can just feel so really much overbearing, right? So the best way, I suppose, is just like how Charles was going through that scenario. He thought of, saving just one person first, which was Raven. And that really kind of made this whole task that felt, way too much of a project for him to handle a lot more manageable. As the Quranic verse puts it, and whoever saves a life, it is as though he has saved all of mankind. So guys, start with one person first. Okay, so you see, Charles at this point has pretty much isolated himself from the rest of the world, partly because he has lost faith in both people and humanity. However, he knows that to make sure that this mission is a success, he is gonna need the help from an old friend, Eric Lenscher, aka known as Magneto. And man, these two guys have just quite a history together, and the dynamics between the two is just, some of the most interesting ones in comic book history, to say the least. Magneto and Charles have different approaches and kind of philosophy eventually, although they fight for a similar cause. And actually because of their kind of disagreements in methods and stuff, which kind of what led to Charles losing his legs, as you see from the first film, right? Where Magneto deflected the bullet and just kind of hit Charles like in the back, and after that he was just like, I can't feel my legs, and yikes, yeah, that's a whole history right there between those two. Yeah. So at this point, Magneto is kind of like, in high security prison within the Pentagon for killing the president, right? For killing JFK. And Charles has to break him out of prison to kind of like get his help. So Charles breaks Magneto out of the prison, partly due to the help of Logan, who was of course first sent back to stop the future from being so bleak to begin with, and also with the help of like Hank McCoy, aka Beast, who had always been by his side, through thick and thin, and the help of Quicksilver, who they just recruited because they needed his super speed to just kind of get things going. Right, so let's kind of look at how Charles goes about to getting help to making sure that the mission is like a success. So it's not just about kind of finding old friends and people that he likes. It's more really about looking at the abilities and the skills they have and what is it that they have to offer to the mission at hand. In a lot of ways, getting back in track in life is really about kind of like surrounding yourself within the right environment and people. For example, someone who just kind of want to begin or start like a fitness journey, they would think that the best kind of first group of support they could get are probably from family and friends, because that's the ones that they're closest to. However, this can kind of like backfire on the person, and especially if the family and friends are not really into fitness. Every time you have to keep in mind when change is happening, there's a high possibility it's probably gonna be frowned upon. Whether it's a positive change or not, it doesn't really matter. Change is usually just deemed as something that's not good. So yeah, instead of kind of getting that support that they were expecting from their family and friends, what would end up happening sometimes is that they get ridiculed and kind of like really kind of get taunted for doing this to begin with, and it's not a good way to kind of start something, especially when you're really early in the stage of starting that journey. What could be the better alternative to this is that you should just find people who are already doing the things that you want to be achieving with your life. So for example, if you want to lift weights and stuff, hit yourself to the gym where you find guys who are lifting weights that can just give you tips and stuff. It's the same thing if you want to learn martial arts, go find yourself like a kickboxing studio or a dojo. These are the kind of people that you're gonna expect to get help from, because they're already off that similar mindset and they're already on the journey, and you really be able to gain a lot from putting yourself in the right spaces. Having a little wisdom in where we place our trust and help can really make or break our journey. Now, what happens when you take steps forward and you make all this effort and yet things feel not just hopeless, but it feels like nothing is happening from all of this? It's really annoying, I know, right? When this happened to our boy Professor X, Charles decided that he was going to take a leap of faith and have trust within himself. At this point, Logan admitted that he wasn't meant to be the man who was sent for this mission to begin with, because he's just not the type of person who is built to kind of like uplift others. It was always meant to be Charles Xavier himself. So they kind of convinced Charles to stop taking the serum that kind of allowed him to walk, so that he could have access to his powers again. What he did was once he have his mind reading abilities right now, he would look into Logan's mind and kind of travels into the future to talk to his older, more bald self. Oh man, you know what? Time traveling concepts in films, I know it's like can be quite a trip, right? But it makes interesting plot devices, and yeah, we wouldn't be having this conversation to begin with without this little kind of like nugget of time travel. Okay, so now Charles Xavier, young Charles Xavier, who's played by James McAvoy, kind of sees the older version of him played by Patrick Stewart, right? And he sees this older version of himself still fighting the good fight that he, at this point, has really long abandoned. This is when, kind of when older Charles basically says to young Xavier that just because someone stumbles and loses their way, it doesn't mean that they're lost forever. At the beginning of the movie, you kind of see, Charles's friends, both old and new, kind of like, been trying to get him back on his feet, or in this case, his wheels. Oh my God, I'm sorry. Oh, sorry, that was lame, yeah. Okay, so the point is that he has had, people that's tried to help him to get back, on track and stuff with his life. But ultimately, it's still that he needed himself, to kind of have that trust to basically accept the journey that he's on and really become the man that he's always meant to be. So young Charles at this point pretty much says to his older version that he just can't bear the pain anymore, because although he has this amazing gift and this amazing power, what it really means is he's carrying a lot of weight of like others as well on his shoulders. Patrick Stewart's Charles basically says to him that what he was really afraid of wasn't the pain of others, because of his powers and all that. It's really his own pain. And this is why he has really kind of like resorted to substance abuse. It wasn't just about him being able to walk, but it was really just about him numbing all that pain away so that he just doesn't have to deal with them anymore. The professor's future self basically, says to his younger self that one of our greatest gifts is to actually to be able to endure the pain without ever breaking. And that really is something that is just, really hard-hitting, because I know that a lot of us tend to just like avoid pain, right? Whether it's our own or like the people around us, we always feel like, we're just so close at that breaking point. We may go through a lot of mental and physical pain, but, if we're really strong, we can still endure it and not allow it to break our spirit. And the beauty of this is that really, in real life, you can find like countless examples of people who are just, not allowing their spirits to break. They kind of really rise above the occasion in creating like, a whole new path and story for themselves. Now, what really also kind of like, conclude the whole arc of Professor X on Days of Future Past is actually hope. Having hope is what really kind of like, we start seeing a resemblance of Charles, not just from his old first-class version, but also, he is now closer to kind of like the Patrick Stewart version of the character. Let's have a little perspective here. Professor X is this dude who can literally read minds and like, control people to do basically anything that he wants. And yet, when you see at the beginning of the movie where he loses hope in everything, all that power, all that ability just kind of been rendered useless. Like, how insane is that, right? Like just really, how insane is that? To imagine that, you have all that power, but then just because your spirit's broken, that the power is really, you can't really use it for anything. Therefore, I feel that, whatever abilities we may think that we rely on to kind of propel our lives forward, just keep in mind that without hope, without that optimism, without that kind of like energy, all of that will just kind of like, it's not really gonna mean anything, man. But with hope, whatever kind of like lack of abilities or whatever that we think we may need more of, you can move mountains, with just that little kind of like optimism and just that openness to kind of learn new things and just kind of like, take one step at a time until, of course, you reach to the top of that mountain. We're all going through our own unique journey, that we're all just given the weight that we can bear, but that doesn't mean that anyone else's journey is less or more than the other person. Just because we're not tasked to kind of like save the whole of humanity or anything like that, that doesn't mean that the task that we're given is not just as, difficult for us, because once again, that everyone plays a different role. So we should all kind of really accept the roles that we've been given and make the most out of it. So whatever your journey is right now, I hope and pray that you have the strength to realize that, although that you stumble and, feel that you may have lost your way, it doesn't mean you have to stay there forever, man, So, just get back up and, just kind of be the person that we know that we can be, man. So, yeah, that's all the popcorn wisdom that I have for today, guys. This is Rizwan Azali. For now, I'm signing out.